Hello, everyone. I'm Everton de Oliveira, the Professor Agua from the Groundwater Project. And this is a pleasure that I have when we have a new book that we can release, and especially this one from an old friend. It was my professor a long time ago. Both of us were younger, I assume, much younger. And it's Edward McBEAN. After his completing his doctorate of philosophy at MIT in 1973, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, for those who don't know. Ed did a postdoc at Cornell University, followed by several decades as a faculty member at the University of Waterloo, Canada. Decade as a president of the CRA, Conestoga Rover Associates Engineering Incorporated, and 2 decades as a professor and Canada Research Chair in Water Supply Security and University Leadership Chair Professor Water Security at the University of Guelph. When I see these things, see how lazy I am. And not only, Ed has published more than 400 articles in the technical literature among outstanding achievements. Well, that is quite impressive. Before I start with you, just a moment, we are the Groundwater Project, a not-for-profit organization that is supported by volunteers that care for groundwater all over the planet. Please consider making a donation or bring your company as a sponsor, because the world needs water, groundwater. Thank you, Ed, for your nice job. Welcome, congratulations. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your career as a professor and consultant, and of course, your participation at the Groundwater Project. Please, thank you.
Okay, I will try. You've already covered a lot of what I've done in the past, but regardless, basically my entire career has been focused on water security. How can water issues, water's not a nice to have, it is essential. And so we have to always look, how can it fail? How might it be vulnerable to, might be an insecure situation or a broken pipe or whatever. There's lots of different ways that water can be troublesome. It's essential we have it, but on the other hand, we've got to figure out, okay, how vulnerable is it? Where will the risks be, impacting something? So what I'm trying to do always, and this has really been a lot of years, is understand the risks and how to better manage them.
That's very good. So, but before I jump into your book, that's a good thing, because you have a long experience at university, and you also have a long experience as a consultant. Can you tell everybody why this improved your view of the work, and how this is better for students? Because when you have the real experience in the market, that's a bit different from just doing research.
Well, agreed. And really, that's been always, I'm not developing new theories. What I'm doing is figuring out how to apply those theories to make most utilization of what the information is. I'm interested in how can I decide how much data do you need? How much investigation do you need? How can it possibly fail? All those types of things. Since, we really, well, risk is a huge problem, and I've obviously written a couple of books about it. So it's huge. And so within a relatively brief chapter, I can't really cover all of those. What I'm trying to do, though, is there's a way of thinking about risk. Okay, it's vulnerable in the following respects. What can I do to, should I collect more data, or should I use a different type of analysis? Because the analysis, the nature of the analytical work is such that there's assumptions built in. So I need to adhere to the statistical assumptions. So I don't develop new statistical theories. What I do is try to apply the theories, and it's a way of thinking in terms of trying to apply those theories to come up with an answer which is reliable and appropriate.
That's applied science. That's very nice. That's true. So could you please make a quick overview of the content of your book, Groundwater Quality and Examples of Risk Interpretation Procedures? Why understanding risk is important, and why reading your book and practicing the exercise you presented?
Well, it's a long and involved question, so I will do my best. But basically,
Please, please.
um, everything has risks. And so what I'm trying to do is introduce the idea, and really the primary focus in the book is examples. How can you use the following information to address a problem? And of course, there's so many different ways that different aspects of risk can enter a decision related to, does it need to be, the site need to be cleaned up or whatever else. So really what I'm trying to do is to make people think more and more about how do I manage to get a strategy and a guidance to make decisions. Okay, this is a problem that you need to either collect more data or remediate the site or whatever else. The value of having the industrial or experience with a major firm was, I got introduced to a lot of problems, so I didn't have to do all of the hard work. That's what students are for, isn't it? I'm just
Yes,
kidding. But
exactly.
obviously, I rely hugely on the people that I work with. But what I can provide is, well, okay, that way of failure might involve the following. How can we address it better, make it more uh, precise? Maybe we need to collect different kinds of data. Sometimes it's a surrogate as opposed to what we really want. But regardless, it's a combination of theory as applied to practice. And I've always been on the practice side, and that's why it's the most fun in the world is working with students. So after 10 years of being in the private sector, that was great, but I decided I really enjoy working with students to figure out, okay, what's a better way to approach a problem? Or, and they do all the hard work. All I can do is provide guidance.
Well, you help them thinking. That's a good guidance. That's very good. That's very good. So,
Exactly.
but for people who are interested in your book, why understanding risk is important?
Well, it's a process that what they can do is you don't um, you want a process to evaluate a alternative strategies, and so all that I can do is provide a guidance. So statistical risk analysis can be very, very important to say that's a concern. You better start measuring that particular component, for example, or you need more data or better data or whatever it might be, but in very many different forms. Um, we have to address risk. People would love to say the NIMBY principle and not in my backyard. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work in a lot of cases. Things need to make progress, and saying, go away, I don't want risk, go away. I mean, I always have this argument sometimes with people saying, well, I go skydiving. And I say, well, if you wanted me to go skydiving, you'd have to throw me out of the airplane. Um, but we do make decisions. Some things are fun, so you take the risk because it's just so exhilarating. But on the other hand, when we're dealing with something like water, we can't afford to do that. We can't take risks. What we're looking to do is to provide the best guidance we can on how to control site contamination, for example. And it may not be to do anything. Maybe natural attenuation will happen such that we don't really need to do anything. But we need to figure that out before we make a pronouncement. So really what all risk is trying to figure out what needs to be done and how can we control the exposure scenarios to people or the environment, so many things like that. And as I always tell my students, I never am worried about running out of things to do because there are just so many dimensions by which um, risk can enter a problem. So we continue to make inroads, and that's the really the interesting and important part.
Interesting, interesting. Who is your focus audience for the book? No.
For practitioners, but they don't necessarily understand the methodologies and the ways to approach a problem. So the book is, unfortunately very brief. There's only so much time available. But what I've tried to do is provide some good examples to demonstrate, hey, this is an example of how you can approach it. By no means are they comprehensive. There's just too many options that could be a problem. So instead, what I'm doing is really trying to just get them thinking about risk assessment. Virtually everything I do involves risk. And so I make decisions on an everyday basis in terms of those things. And,
Yeah.
that's really useful. And obviously with, we'll not mention the number of decades, but over a number of decades, I've understood and approached a lot of different problems.
That's
So
very good.
the merits of the classroom is I can bring examples to the classroom to say, this is what could happen if you do this, that type of thing.
Interesting. So, it is, and particularly for hydrogeologists not familiar with this topic, why they should read it?
Well, if they want to understand, have they got enough data, for example? One of the ways of risk assessment is to say, well, we could be 92% probable that we're not causing a problem, but we'll never get to 100%. We'd all like risk to become zero. But it is a philosophy, it's an approach, risk assessment, an approach that by which we can assess the characteristics of a problem and say, okay, this could be really problematic if you don't undertake some initiative to, capture the plume, for example, if it was contaminated groundwater.
I have a question that comes usually from, environmental friendly people that doesn't know exactly what risk is. And the question is, does risk management prevent remediation of contaminated sites?
No, definitely not. It is a way of assessing how much management we need to do. And so it may be apparent that there's certain initiatives that need to be undertaken to control that migration. But, you need a basis to make that decision. So you need to collect the data. You need to understand what the characteristics, for example, of a chemical might be. Will it volatilize, come into the atmosphere? Just so many things like that. So it's a really fascinating and comprehensive, but
It is.
you need to keep a focus. And so what the intent of the book is to make people think about how to address the aspects that are of the greatest risk or greatest concern.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you because, well, some places it's hard for some people that are not aware of the difficulties, the technical difficulties that we cannot clean it up back to, to pristine conditions, like
Mhm.
if it ever was, for example. But this is not easy for some people to understand. So risk is so important as a tool, right? And your
It
book.
is. It is absolutely key. And you're absolutely right. We cannot make the risk zero. What we can make it is small enough that is a reasonable, we accept risks on an everyday life.
Oh
Some
yeah.
people smoke cigarettes and they know that it's risky. But if they smoke too many, that's the problem. So, or drink alcohol or whatever else. But
Yeah.
it is a trade-off that we make, and we do it every day on a personal basis. What we need to do is,
We drive a car with a gas tank on it, right?
yeah, and no brakes. Uh,
So we're talking about, that's a source of, some carcinogenic products in the gas tank, and we live with it, right? It's safe.
well, for the same reason I advise my children, when you're pumping gas into your car, stand upwind of where the gas is being pumped, because the fumes coming out include BTEX or benzene, toluene, ethyl benzene,
Yeah,
xylene, etc. You don't
exactly.
need to assume additional risk. Make the approach what you think is reasonable and appropriate for a particular application.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Very good.
Whenever I can lower my risk of things that I don't like, I certainly do.
All right, thank you very much. So I believe your book's going to be a success. It's a very objective. I like books like yours. You know, it treats a given topic straight away and make people think with exercises. I like the exercises. They're very you know, different approaches. You use different contaminants, and it's quite
Well,
useful.
yes, I mean, some cause cancer, some cause death just by virtue of toxicity, that type
Yeah,
of thing. And so there are just obviously, there's 25,000 pharmaceuticals alone on the marketing,
exactly.
and some of those can cause death as well. What we try to do is to understand what the characteristics are of that chemical and make judgments on the basis. So,
Yeah, well, like
but it,
PFAS, you mentioned PFAS right at the beginning of your book, right?
yeah, it's it's challenging because there is just so many details that we really don't know enough about. I mean, governments cannot explore alternative uh, chemicals that come onto the market. When the PCBs came on the market, the actual person that came up with the idea won a Nobel Prize. He wouldn't now. I mean, it's wonderful PCBs. They never lose their ability to lubricate. But unfortunately, there's a side effect. And so you got to be
Yeah.
very careful with what you do with it. Well,
True.
that was back in the early 1900s type of thing. But, we keep inventing new things. So um, it's just, we just need to be as careful as we can, respectful of what dangers we might entail, and do the best we can manage.
That's true. That's true. And science is so good for that because we're learning as we go, right? Because you're always producing new materials for.
Yeah. 5,000 new chemicals come onto the market every year. We don't know what some of them that have caused horrific damage, but it takes a while to figure that out.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Chloropropane was a wonderful thing to stop the challenges of the grape industry from accessing
Yeah.
the grape roots would access the water. So they came up with dibromyl chloropropane. But after about 10 years, what they discovered, well, this causes sterility in males. Well, it took them a long time to figure that out. But I guess, fortunately, we did,
Yeah.
we meaning society. But it's so many things have happened. Now it's all over the place, California, uh, Hawaii, and so on.
Yep.
So we learn as we proceed. We just need
Hard
to be
way.
as
We
careful
learn
as we can.
the hard way usually.
We don't want to learn too many things the hard way. That's just trouble.
That's for sure. That's for sure. All right. So everybody, we had here Edward McBEAN. I really recommend you to take a look at his book. It's a very effective book from my experience. You take a look. It's a short text, but have lots of examples, and the exercise are quite useful for someone who wants to learn a little bit on how to deal with risk. And if you want to learn in depth, you'll get there as well. Thank you very much, Ed.
Yep. Thank
Congratulations
you.
for a job well done. Thanks.
Thank you.